Welcome to today's webinar, Conveyancing Tips for New Builds and How to Avoid Pitfalls and Costly Delays. As with all our webinars, we simply aim to add value, and by inviting specialists in their field to share their knowledge, experience and expertise, we hope today's webinar will perhaps potentially fill in any gaps or simply confirm that you're already on the right path. Firstly, a copy of today's webinar will be available for those wanting a copy. And whilst time won't allow for any Q&A session, we definitely welcome any questions and or queries, which we will respond to, details coming later. And I'm in good company today for this topic. With me from Hansells Solicitor is Adrian Toulson, who previously worked as an in-house solicitor for a regional development company. And consequently, Adrian understands the pitfalls and appreciates the costly delays, importantly, through the eyes of a developer rather than simply acting as a solicitor. Adrian now works with developers from site acquisition through planning and right through to the sale of the final plot. So before Adrian gives you a brief insight on how to avoid pitfalls and costly delays, and in the next 20 minutes or so, let's set the scene. You've overcome untold hurdles to get to the stage where, with some trepidation, you've come to the market with that all-important first unit, and you are that bit closer to getting some income back. A great build, a great estate agent, and great news. And doubtless with a sense of relief, a buyer's been found and you've sale agreed the first unit. And at this point, the conveyancing clock starts. As I'm sure you will appreciate, the first sale tends to set the precedent for those that follow. The more creases in this part of the process that need to be ironed out, the longer it will take. And without a doubt, the longer this part of the process goes on, the greater the chance the sale will go wrong.
Getting ready for the first sale throughout the construction journey and ahead of going to market is the key to getting paid sooner and sleeping easier. Or, more often than not, an inadequate legal pack for the first sale is where it generally all goes wrong.
Okay, so the conveyancing clock has started. There may even be a reservation process dictating the time frame the buyer has to work within. But from a conveyancing point of view, Adrian, what has to happen next?
At this stage, it's important to remember that even though the clock has started, the buyer's solicitor can't legally get started until they receive the draft contract pack from the developer's solicitor. Any time lost here simply means everyone is treading water. Once the buyer's solicitor does receive the draft contract pack, they have a checklist. Buyer solicitors all have very similar checklists based around the UK Finance Mortgage Lenders Handbook. Your objective as the seller is to tick off all the key items on the buyer's conveyancer's checklist. If you can't, then the sale stops. So here are a number of key items to tick off. Getting planning permissions signed off, dealing with your Section 106 requirements, getting your warranty provider on board, obtaining utility connection consents, connecting your site to the public highway and road adoption for estate roads or private road agreements, preparing your plot sale plans, and setting up a management company.
So let's walk through them, starting with planning. What does the buyer's solicitor need?
So for planning permission conditions, any planning condition that requires a condition discharge, a buyer's solicitor will want to see a condition discharge notice from the local authority. For any pre-commencement requirements, the buyer's solicitor will want to see documentary evidence that these have been satisfied. Any preoccupation conditions, again, buyer solicitors will want to see proof that these have been concluded to the local authority's satisfaction. Now, pre-occupation conditions may include having in place a completed Section 278 Highways Act agreement. That's the right to work on the public highway. A highways agreement will be needed if you're building a bell mount and paths from the existing highway onto your site. Whilst highway agreements are often agreed in principle with the Highways Authority, it can take time to get the actual legal agreement concluded. Remember, a buyer solicitor will want to see a completed Section 278 agreement if this is a pre-occupation planning permission.
Okay, so at this stage, it's not necessarily that the conditions haven't been discharged. It's often the lack of appropriate evidence that will cause the delay. So what are the documents you need to collect and keep?
Right. For example, if your development includes any element of planning obligation via a Section 106 or unilateral undertaking, a unilateral undertaking is just a mini Section 106, the buyer solicitor will need evidence the obligations have been completed. Now, payment obligations are straightforward. You just need to ensure you get receipts from the local authority for any financial payments you make. Harder obligations, such as approvals for landscaping schemes, will need sign-offs from planning officers. Affordable housing sale agreements will need to be exchanged. And for local facilities, such as bus stops, planning officers' sign-offs will be required when the work's been completed. Now, most Section 106 obligations come with a strict timetable to complete your obligations, such as before the first or 10th occupation or before 25% of all private sales. The key here is to ensure you do not pass a Section 106 key date before obtaining evidence from your planning officer that you've satisfied your obligations and conditions. Otherwise, all your plot sales will stop until the obligation is resolved.
Okay, so the moral of this story is to back everything up with documented evidence.
Correct. Yes, Peter.
Okay, brilliant. So moving on to warranty providers and/or PCCs.
Get your warranty provider engaged as early as possible. If you're selling off plan, a buyer solicitor will want to see your development is registered with a warranty provider. The warranty provider will supply you with an initial site registration certificate. This is an essential item in the legal pack because naming your warranty provider is a requirement to comply with House Building Consumer Codes, and nearly every reputable warranty provider is linked to a consumer code these days.
Okay, Adrian, so just an important footnote here before we move off warranties, and that's really to say, do be mindful that whilst PCCs are acceptable to 95% of high street lenders, they're generally not acceptable on a site with over 10 to 12 units. That could become a costly oversight. Now, right, moving on to connections into services and utility providers, I've certainly seen this almost jeopardize some developments.
Well, for small developments, connections into services may not require formal legal agreements. Often, connection consent letters are produced by water and sewage companies. Make sure you can provide these consent letters. Where formal agreements are required, a plot buyer solicitor will need to see the completed easement, or Section 104 adoption agreement for drains are in place before completing any plot sale. Surface water and sustainable drainage system requirements are often the most challenging to get signed off by planning officers. Make sure your technical consultants who prepare your SUDs being the sustainable drainage systems, also obtain conditioned discharge sign-offs from planning officers.
Adrian, I imagine there could be occasions where a developer might not be directly involved, where something like this might perhaps be subcontracted. Nevertheless, I assume the importance will still be to obtain the evidence from the subcontractor.
Absolutely, Peter.
Okay, so on to utility providers.
So for utility providers, especially broadband, it's essential all utility providers have official postal addresses for your new homes, not plot numbers. With buyers wanting to work from home the day they move in, ensuring utility providers can get new accounts open quickly is a key to avoiding complaints.
And whilst that sounds strange, Adrian, I think you've got an example.
Yeah, I have a recently acted for a developer where the buyer was delighted with their new home. However, they could not set up a broadband account because the fibre installation contractor for the site only had plot numbers, not postal addresses. So on the day they moved in, they could not get connected. It took 3 days to resolve, during which the buyer could not work from home. This led to a complaint and a claim for losses. So a buyer who was delighted with the quality of their new home turned into a complaint because they couldn't create a broadband account, all because official postal addresses were not circulated to key connection contractors.
Wow, that almost sounds incredible to listen to. And of course, what a shame. And actually, getting the right postal address goes well beyond simply facilitating utilities. Without the correct postal address from the outset, the memorandum of sale is likely to go out with a plot address rather than a postal address, which sounds okay until you factor in that to exchange contracts, everything has to match and with the correct postal address. So there might be a delay in applying for searches. The contract will need amending. The initial mortgage application will be incorrect. So the survey is likely to be delayed. The CML can't be completed, and eventually the mortgage offer will need to be amended. Now, retrospectively, changing a simple address when it involves several different sets of parties, lawyers, lenders, and surveyors, isn't always as simple as it sounds.
Correct. And the conveyancing clock stops again. So on to plans. You will be working from your architect's plans and technical drawings on a daily basis. But have you supplied your solicitor with your architect's site layout plans and plot plans? The buyer solicitor works from land registry plans. These are often quite different from architect's plans.
So, Adrian, what's the best course of action here then?
Right, my top tip for you. Before your first plot sale, get your architect to overlay their master site plan over a land registry title plan. This will highlight any differences that can be addressed before it's too late. Your architect should also overlay the locations of each plot onto a land registry compliant plan. The solicitor you have appointed to put together your sales legal pack can then apply to the land registry to pre-approve all your plot sale plans. Now, this is a free service from the land registry. By using land registry pre-approved plot plans, buyer solicitors can confidently order searches and carry out their checks.
Okay, so on paper, everyone's now singing from the same hymn sheet, but does this always translate to site? And if not, what issues can arise?
Well, fencing and hedgerows can cause issues. Fences rarely follow the exact legal boundary line, especially if the legal boundary is a ditch or a hedge. Often boundary location issues only arise during a plot sale when a buyer's mortgage surveyor or the buyer themselves notices the garden they are expecting to buy is smaller because the fence line is inside a hedge or a ditch. Again, land registry pre-approval of your architect's overlay plans can ensure the plot boundaries you're actually constructing on site match the plans supplied in the sales legal pack.
Brilliant. So we're almost there now. On to management companies, and something I imagine will be a changing landscape with the introduction of B&G and the need for a 30-year plan.
That's correct, Peter. Management companies have traditionally been used because local authorities do not take on public open spaces. Also, management companies can significantly help developers constructing private roads avoid road adoption agreements and avoid paying those advanced payment code costs known as APCs. Where planning conditions require the creation of a management company, this needs to be in place before the first plot sale so the management company can be named in the legal pack. The management company will not be actively trading. It's just a paper company at the start, but does need to be in place. A developer's solicitor should be able to create the management company and ensure the management company is approved by the highway authority, which will be required if your development has private roads. A buyer's solicitor is going to want to see a management company pack, including a service charge budget for the first year.
And of course, from a B&G point of view, smaller developments will perhaps now need to consider a covenant obligation or a manco.
Yes, they will. Nutrient neutrality and biodiversity net gain. We can't avoid nutrient neutrality. From the 2nd of April this year, small sites are now caught by the obligation to mitigate 10% of biodiversity net gain on site unless an exemption applies. This will create a requirement for ongoing management of nutrient neutrality mitigation plans, but developers will not want long-term obligations. So placing these obligations within a residents-owned management company will be key. However, a plot buyer and their solicitor will want to know what their responsibility and financial liabilities are. So, when creating your management company, remember to include in the budget ongoing nutrient neutrality management costs. If you're using a company agent to create your management company who is outside the county, they may not be aware that a management company's constitution needs to include the ability to recharge all nutrient neutrality mitigation costs that will arise in the years ahead.
Absolutely. So our key takeaways: definitely keeping your planning officer happy, because you will need the discharge notices and receipts for Section 106 payments. Get your architect's plans and legal plans matched up, then pre-approved by Land Registry, obtain the postal addresses, and all before the first plot sale. And finally, get the manco set up and ensure the manco is created so it can take care of the long-term nutrient neutrality obligations and approved by highways authorities, of course, if approval is required.
Yes, that's right. View your legal pack as a logbook containing the full service history of your plot. The buyer's solicitor is going to need to inspect all the records before signing off the plot for the buyer's lender.
Adrian, earlier you shared an example with me. In fact, you gave me evidence of a recent transaction where the buyer's solicitor gave you a progress report on a 58-unit site with 12 affordables.
Yes, that's right. I try and work with the same solicitor acting for every plot buyer wherever I can. On a recent plot sale, I issued the sale legal pack on the 17th of May. The buyer paid his search fees and handed over his ID to his solicitor on the 20th of May. And on the 21st of May, the buyer's solicitor reported to the buyer with the plot sale contract for signature. No inquiries were raised. We are just waiting for searches and mortgage offer. The key psychological point for the buyer is that they have signed the plot sale contract, so they feel committed to the legal process, even though we've not exchanged.
And commitment's absolutely what we want. Now, that is utopia. However, imagine the time, the energy, and the potential sales saved by essentially enabling your buyer to get buying and, importantly, committed to spending their money quicker. They will be less likely to pull out. We are certainly aiming to better support our clients in this arena. We're now trying to encourage buyers to see the benefit of using a local solicitor one familiar with our local nuances, one that has perhaps already physically been to site to better understand it, one that's already engaged with our developer client's legal representative to form an early working relationship. And indeed, we even have examples of certain local solicitors that are prepared to apply for a set of searches in advance of the site going live, or indeed yet having a client to act on behalf of. Okay, that concludes today's webinar. A huge thank you to Adrian for his time, input, and expertise for today. I know Adrian is more than happy to field any questions or inquiries, or even meet to explore with you how we could save you time and, importantly, money. Those wishing a copy of today's webinar, please just let us know. Mine and Adrian's contact details are on the screen. And it only leaves me to say, until next time, thank you for joining us.
Thank you.